Welcome to all those just signing in. We'll give it a few more moments to get a full house before we begin the presentation. Thank you.
Just look at your time. So you're not moving.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start. Well, warm welcome, everyone. Thank you for signing back on to our fall webinar series. We're here with Alison Levy and Scott Sereno, who will be talking about their book called Hardy Fruit and Nuts. A special thanks to the Frank and Abbott Cabot Society for planned giving. Could I have the next slide, please? The Garden Conservancy educational programs are made possible in part by the Coleman and Susan Burke Distinguished Lecture Fund, the Len Hart Education Fund, with additional support from Richie Battle, Mrs. Camille Buttress, Courtney and Terence Daniels, Melissa and John Corelli, Celia Hagee, Susan and William McKinley, and the Rutgers Family Charitable Foundation. I'm here with Alison Levy and Scott Sereno, who are both visual artists and co-directors of Hortus Arboretum and Botanical Gardens in New York's Hudson Valley. Their garden began as a source of inspiration and raw materials for their art. Over time, their interest in growing a wider selection of plants expanded until the garden encompassed 11 acres and became their primary passion. Along the way, they began planting a vast diversity of plants, both edible and ornamental. This grew into an extensive collection of cold hardy cactus, magnolia trees, viburnums, and grafted fruit trees with a focus on rare, underutilized plants. The Arboretum is a non-profit organization and a level 2 arboretum. Levy and Sereno have been opening Hortus Arboretum for open days for many years. So really a very warm and special thank you for joining us today. I will be collecting any questions for the presenters. At any time during their presentation, please do submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And both have promised to leave a little bit of time at the end to answer those questions. Over to you two. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Horatio. It's wonderful. Hello, everyone. I'm Alison.
And I'm Scott.
And thank you for joining us on this beautiful, balmy August day. Oh, I'm sorry, it's November, isn't it? So thank you for coming inside, for those of you who are here. I'll tell you a little background about us. And I just wanted to give another shout out to the Garden Conservancy. And these are some guests who have visited over the years for our open day program, as well as when we do the open garden day. So our story is we left San Francisco during the first dot-com explosion in 1999, and we moved to the beautiful town of Stone Ridge that's located in the lower Hudson Valley in New York. Having lived in San Francisco near the Stribing Arboretum, which incidentally became our young daughter's playground, We knew that when we moved to Stone Ridge and bought this 3-acre, originally it was a 3-acre property, we wanted to have an arboretum for our backyard. Now, 23 years later, we are a level 2 arboretum with a total of 21 acres. About 8 of them are currently cultivated. The gardens are run as a nonprofit organization whose mission is to sustain the native, unusual, and historic plant life, as well as to serve as a vital educational resource for the public. We are also focused on saving rare and endangered plants from around the world, with the goal of making sure that species diversity is preserved. And then you can see in this image here, we strongly believe that tasting things is the best way to know whether or not you want to grow it yourself. So we, during our open days, will have people try whatever fruit is available. And this looks like it's our Illinois ever-bearing mulberry,
which is excellent.
Do you want to just talk about this current growing year?
Anybody who lives in the Northeast knows that the last growing year was really abysmal. I would say this is the worst growing year we've ever had. By that, I mean the most disasters in a single season. We had an ice storm where it rained ice for about 24 hours and brought down power lines. And then in spring, we had a gypsy moth infestation.
Spongy
moth infestation. And then there was a long, prolonged drought. And in addition to that, because of 2 years ago, there was a record oak mast. I think there was a huge amount of chipmunks and squirrels, which means they were stripping a lot of fruit trees more than they would. And we had trees that were never touched, were stripped completely of fruit. So it's been a fairly tough growing year for anybody in the Northeast, I think.
Yeah, I'd say. This is a book that we recently wrote, published by Chelsea Green Press. It's really the premise for this slideshow presentation we're going to show and go into a bit. And we side gig as landscapers and have for many years. And two of the things we are often asked about is, why is my peach tree not producing peaches that are beautiful and that they're brown and rotting? And the other very popular question was about apples. Why is my apple tree not producing apples? And as Scott has a little ditty he likes to say about taking care of those particular ones.
Because of wild cherry trees in our forest.
Small ditty.
Yes. Peach trees are plagued by everything that attacks a wild cherry. So when I plant something like a peach tree, it's like going to war. I have to garden in such a way where I anticipate being attacked constantly. One of the theme of this book and most of these plants is they're 90% pest free and do not require a lot of spraying. So that's why we wrote this book.
Or any
spraying at all.
Frankly.
So that's what we've highlighted, things that don't require any spraying and are 95% pest free.
So the very first one that we'd like to talk about is, it's an Asian vine. It's Actinidia colomicta, commonly known as Arctic kiwi, sometimes confused with Chinese kiwi, which it is not. We're focusing on the Arctic kiwi. We find that this will produce flowers and fruit in a much younger age.
Within 4 years often.
Beautiful vine. Look at this gorgeous leaf coloration. I'm really big on edible plants also holding their own with quote unquote decorative or ornamental plantings. And a lot of times they're just as beautiful, if not more so, than something that doesn't necessarily produce an edible food or crop after. This pink is often indicative of a male vine. Arctic kiwi is in the wild dioecious, so it has separate male and female plants. So you will need to have both in order to get the fruits. Here we put it over a structure. So if this is something you're going to plant, it's something you need to think about. We're showing the male and female flowers, often not depicted in books that are out there. And that's a very common question. These are the kiwis that are forming, and commercially they're known as kiwi grapes, and that's how they're marketed. These will have none of the brown fuzz that you're used to getting on their larger relatives that we get at a supermarket, but the flavor is just the same. And when it's growing and happy, it could be in a full sun or part shade environment. It produces copious amounts of fruit in August. And you kind of see, depending on the particular cultivar or variety, you have a variety of different shapes, but pretty much the taste is all the same. And this is a zone 3 plant.
Pawpaw is now experiencing a cultural renaissance in the United States, becoming more popular as a planted thing. Asamina triloba. Biggest thing is that these have the most sugar of any native wild fruit, traditional Native American tribal food, colonial food. You need 2 trees to get fruit. I think they're about zone 5, zone 4, sometimes up to the Canadian border as a native tree. The biggest thing is that these have a taproot, and once the taproot goes into the ground, you do not want to move the plant because you can often kill the plant by moving it. So it's best to just leave it in place. Other than that, they're tolerant of heavy clay soil, slightly wet soil, slightly dry soil. They don't seem to be bothered by too many things. The only other bugaboo that a lot of people have with pawpaws is that when they're young, they want shade. When they're old, they want full sunlight. And because that can be complicated, the simplest way to alleviate that
Is to read our book. So
or to put a baby plant in the ground and cover it with a large tomato cage with a shade cloth so that it's shaded for 3 or 4 years. And once the trees get about 4 feet, they're okay for full sunlight. And then
but
you
look
can
at these
remove it.
flowers. They're absolutely gorgeous. They
Yes.
hang upside down. I think typically I got this photo being
Yes.
on the ground on my knees. You could see the pollen dispersal in the flower on the left.
Said to replicate decomposing meat in color and smell. There's a myth that these are attracted just to carrion flies, and that's you saw from the slide earlier, they're just attracted to any flies, pretty much. Every imaginable fly has come to our bushes.
These are the pawpaws developing.
Yeah, also called the Michigan banana or the Indiana banana, and the best thing they're called is hillbilly mangoes. That's my favorite name for them.
We're really grateful that this native tree has really become very popular as a backyard fruiting plant right now. It seems like everyone wants to be growing this, which
And it
is
can
wonderful.
take 10 years to produce fruit, which is a pain in the neck. But once they produce, they pretty much don't have any problems. No pests whatsoever. Ours, after maybe 18 years, have never been attacked by anything.
No.
Even rodents, they don't eat too many of the fruit. They'll nibble on a few, but fruits are never cleaned out. Very easy to grow.
Sure.
Castanea dentata cross mollissima Dunstan. When American chestnuts were killed by the blight, a man named Howard Dunstan bred a blight-resistant American chestnut by taking an American chestnut and cross-pollinating it with a tiny bit of the Chinese gene pool. And we've grown these for now about 9-10 years,
yeah.
and ours have never been hit by the disease, and we get beautiful crops of American chestnuts. Those are the beautiful male flowers. You do need 2 for cross-pollination, and these can get big. These can get, 30, 50 feet. And then you can see in the center there, the female flower on the end of the branch with all the male flowers, that's starting to kind of get pollinated, the little anther sticking out there. And there it is growing and starting to develop in size, hopefully ripening throughout the season. And there they are becoming mature, very beautiful, handsome tree, well worth planting in your forest. And those are the nuts. And when that starts to happen, all the squirrels cock a bright eye upon your tree and start to go, my goodness, look at that, American chestnuts. So we take little hooks and we pop our nuts down and put them into boxes in our living room. If you wait till the nuts to fall out into your lawn, they're already gone. The squirrels are patrolling the ground. So if you want to get nuts, it's best to kind of preempt that. You can see the one over on the right there. That's one that's already dropped its nut. And then the point where they're cracking and they're about ripe, you can pop them off and let them ripen in your house.
This is Corylus americana, American hazelnut, which I'm going to also kind of talk quickly about with European hazelnut. I have some images of that as well. And the nice thing about grouping these two together is because they will cross-pollinate one another. But if you're a purist or a nativist and you only want to do the American hazelnut, you'll need 2 of the specimens in order to get the nuts. But if you like diversity as we do, then an American and a European will work well. These are the catkins, the male flowers that are forming. This tree has both the male and female flowers on it. And in early spring, the catkins start to develop and they elongate quite a bit until they get to the point where they will want to pollinate the female flower. And here you can see we kind of circle that. It's teeny, it's a little tiny thing. This is completely dependent on wind for pollination.
Because it's early in spring, there aren't pollinators awake.
So with a little bit of a wind gust over time, you will start to see on your shrub or small tree, or sometimes even large tree, these involucres start to develop. Again, beautiful, highly ornamental, even if you never got the nut in there, which this year we got nothing because during the drought, which is the time where these nuts needed to actually the nut meats to form, we had 2 months of a drought and we didn't give any extra irrigation. That's not what we do here. But this is from several years ago, just to kind of give you an idea of the beautiful forms that they are. They're just stunning.
Yep.
And there's lots of different cultivars now that have been bred by different university extensions for larger nuts.
Yeah, they all taste the same, but it's
Mhm.
just a size. European nuts are slightly bigger than the American wild
Size
ones.
matters in
but
this
yeah.
one, yep.
And that's probably slate or
Mhm.
Geneva, which is a larger nut.
And then I had mentioned the European hazelnut. So the main difference for this is really the color of the catkins. Nope.
No,
The
the catkins are red because this is a red leafed form.
Sorry,
Yellow,
that's
the
true.
yellow,
Red,
the catkins
yes,
are yellow on
the
the European.
European. Thank you. That's why I bring them along on these things.
Thank you.
Here again is the male catkin on the left and the female flower on the right. This is a cultivar called Rote Zeller, which we got many years ago, maybe close to 19 years ago.
Very
So the
handsome.
first foliage comes out and is this gorgeous purple. This is toward the back of our field garden. So it gets, you know, a part shade aspect, not full sun. And this is it starting to revert to its green. This can take, it's pretty adaptable in terms of
heavy
the
clay
heavy clay.
soil, sandy
Just
soil.
glorious. Look at that.
I know.
Why wouldn't you want to grow this? And again, the involkers on these particular cultivars, the red leaf, purple leaf,
Magnificent.
are just stunning.
Yeah, the nursery industry decided not to stop selling these a while ago, and I have no idea
stop selling, right,
why they stopped selling them.
Yeah.
Everything about them is beautiful.
Stunning. And as we talked about a little while ago, this is nature's helper starting a little tree for us. Thank you,
chipmunk.
squirrel or
Yeah,
chipmunk,
yes.
right?
Stealing them and burying them in the
Right.
ground, and then they open up and you have a little baby tree in your nursery. I love quince, European quince, Baltic quince, Cydonia oblonga, absolutely beautiful trees. The flowers alone are
Just
white
stunning.
with tinted pink, which means when they open up, they have a candy cane striping. Absolutely beautiful. Tough as nails, can grow in bad clay soil, can grow in sandy soil, can grow in Mediterranean climates, can grow in New England, very tough, adaptable. Fruit has to be cooked generally, although some of the contemporary Baltic quince cultivars can be eaten raw. But when cooked with sugar, you pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, enter into heaven. The flavor is a cross between peach and pineapple. It makes divine
And the
aromatic
floral
jelly.
fragrance is incredible.
This is one of those things that was dumped by a lot of the nursery industry as not being worth it because it has to be cooked, but it's incredible.
Yeah.
The quality of the fruit's amazing. And you're looking at Kagonskaya. This is one of the Baltic cultivars, which tend to be a little less disease-free. The only disease issue that really, the bad one that affects these is cedar rust in our environment.
Mhm.
So I'm mindful about pulling dead mummified cedar fruit off and keeping the tree clean. Other than that, I don't spray it, and we get harvests every year. It's a wonderful thing. Very, very good. American persimmon. another great fruit, Diosporus virginiana. Another adaptable, hard to kill tree once it gets established. I would recommend, if you're going to put an American persimmon, get a grafted self-fertile variety that has a long track record, because otherwise you have to get separate male and female trees. And a grafted self-fertile variety will produce delicious fruit like this. This is a Zukis, Szukis, which is a great dwarf tree. The fruit has a wonderful butterscotch kind of flavor. It is not as sweet as an Asian tree, like a hochia, but it's wonderful. And butterscotch flavored, really great. Other than that, adaptable, sandy soil, heavy clay soil, slightly wet soil, great. Fall fruit, that's what our trees look like now. The leaves are off and you're left with the fruit ripening on, which has to be dead ripe.
In order to,
Yeah,
yes.
pancake batter, mushy. The best way to find it is to lightly shake the tree and let the ripe ones fall, or eat the fresh ones each morning that have fallen off, so you know you're not eating a funky one.
Yeah, and I would also say, depending on the particular cultivar, sometimes the fruit will persist onto the branches way into like November, December, and especially when you have a taller persimmon tree
That you can't get to.
You can't get to. Sometimes you can try and hit the top branches or shake it down, and so it's kind of fun to get some persimmon fruit in early December. If you can get there before our dogs do, which they love
in this
fruit.
picture, those are pawpaws in the background, also turning fall color.
Just the glorious,
Loaded.
Yeah.
Loaded.
Beautiful. This is Eleganus multiflora, also known, or we call it gumi or gumi berry. This is the very well-behaved relative of the very bad autumn olive, I guess, if you want to put adjectives onto something. I try not to, but we love this. This is a self-fertile plant. So that just means you just need one in order to get a prodigious amount of fruit.
And you only want one. One plant will eventually feed an entire family.
The flowers are beautiful, early spring. They are heavily scented, kind of reminds me a little bit of a jasmine floral quality that you can smell from 30 feet away easily. It is kind of a little bit of an unkempt shrub, or at least that's the way we keep it. We're not pruning it. Again, so low maintenance. The only thing we've done over time is add some compost to increase the fertility. And then you could see the fruit are small, but they're highly decorative. They have these little bronzy kind of scars. I'm forgetting the technical term of what they're called.
Patterns on
which is really actually prevalent on every aspect of the tree itself, or the shrub itself, on the leaves, on the fruit, on the flowers as well. And they taste like sour cherries. So for us, we can't grow sour cherries anymore. And this is a wonderful substitute, super easy. I make a great jam. The only, I guess, caveat with this one is that when the fruit ripens, which is mid-August, birds love it too. That's not really the caveat. I was just going to say the seeds for these are on the large side compared to the size of the fruit, but so worth it. Really lovely.
And again, if you like autumn olive, but you know that autumn olive is one of the most invasive species in the Northeast, this in maybe 18 years has thrown maybe less than 10 seeds.
Less,
very doesn't seem to spread, so it's well behaved.
Yep.
Lonicera cerulean honeyberry, also called haskap in Canada, native to Siberia, native to the Canadian Arctic. I also think the top part of the United States, places like Minnesota, very tough. The flowers are so used to abysmal hard winters that they don't even mind when they're blooming, and if it goes down to 18 degrees, they will still produce fruit. Tough, resilient, can grow in lots of different types of soil. The big thing is that you want to get a matching set for cross-pollination. There are early blooming cultivars and late blooming. And if you're ordering, you can often get them in sets. You want to get the early blooming ones, because this is the first fruit to set in northern gardens. This is before strawberries and before blueberries. So this is sort of like getting a blueberry like a month or two early,
But
basically.
I'd say it's a week or two before strawberries. It's
Strawberries, yeah,
really an
yeah.
environmental factor, whether or not they're gonna ripen fully. And the
And-
one thing, as you were saying, is there's so many different types
Yeah,
that
there
you
are
can get
dozens,
dwarfed ones that are no more than
3 feet.
right, or
So they
8
can be
feet.
fit into a small garden
They're great.
fairly well. And often the fruit is kind of hidden underneath
Mhm.
the bushes. It'll look like you don't have anything.
Right,
And you lift up the branches and they're filled with these
loaded.
kind of like blueberries, but they're shaped like tubes.
Mhm.
Again, because this is Arctic, I think this is like almost zone 3.
Mhm.
And because we're on the warm end of its growing zone in zone 6, ours are in full sun, and quite frankly, it's too hot.
much.
Ours get scorched and are a little bedraggled looking. They wake up in spring and produce flowers, and they're fine. But if we were giving them a little bit of shade, because we're not in the Arctic parts of Canada, like maybe if we were in 4 or 5 hours, they would probably be a little
much
happier.
Mhm.
But a great, never a problem. No disease problems. Birds will pick at the berries, but a lot of times they're hidden underneath the bushes and they're kind of hard to get to.
And you can see the berries are sizable. I mean, they're kind of blockish, and depending again on the variety, the shapes of them are different. But I find that the older this particular plant
Yes.
is, the fruit is becoming tastier, which is true for a lot of fruiting plants. Lycium barbarum,
Barbarum.
also known as goji berry. And for those of you who are into like
Health food.
yeah,
Granola health snacks.
yeah, like us, kind of crunchy. You could maybe find your goji berry at your local co-op, although I'll tell you, by me, my local co-op, and no offense to you, but they're not carrying goji, which is even more of a reason why you should be growing it if you like this kind of thing, because now it all comes from China. And I do like this. Is it a vine? Is it a shrub? We're not quite sure.
It's floppy.
It's floppy. It's also known as wolfberry. And the thing I like about it is flowers and fruits at the same time, which is not always that common in the fruiting world. And the flowers happen, and generally I would say in August, but because this was a weird year, we didn't really get flowers until like September. And it's just starting to like fruit now. But when it does fruit, you can often get a prodigious amount of it, a lot of them, and just kind of showing the nature.
Forsythia-like habit.
Yeah, it's floppy.
Floppy.
So this is not for those who want like a kemped up.
Unless you plant it near a garden fence and you train them up.
Sure.
That's another traditional way. Or you put a stake in the ground and stake it up. It can be kept neater.
But just this quick harvest, they're great for drying. Scott and I don't care for the taste of these.
They're in the nightshade family, and they have kind of watery tomato
like
flavor.
a really bad tomato.
It's when they're dried that they become
delicious.
Kind of licorice cranberry flavored.
Little sweet.
Tart sweet, yeah.
Very easy to use. Again, I'm really into something that is as decorative as the next. And I think that these berries are highly decorative, and you do see them. So I give a shout out to this goji berry.
Maclura tricuspidata, which has gone through about 8 name changes, now called Maclura tricuspidata che, commonly known as che. This is a little known member of the Osage orange family. So this tree is actually grafted onto Osage orange. And that's important because if you're going to buy this plant, you want to get a self-fertile female that sets fruit by itself, because otherwise, if it's pollinated, you need a male and a female. And apparently there's a major difference in the quality of the fruit.
Yeah.
And this is also used to feed silk moths in the silk moss industry. But this strange, interesting fruit, which is more planted in the south than it is in the north. So that means right now some of our fruit has dropped off the tree because it's getting cool. But when it ripens, it takes on a curious flavor that's a cross between sliced watermelon and fig. And my wife gets notes of lychee in it. It's a very interesting, and you can make a kind of a che jam out of it. And it's also beautiful. The tree is beautiful. Looks a little like a mulberry tree.
I actually think it looks like Cornus cusa, a Chinese dogwood with the leaf and how the fruits look like in the fall.
This is zone 6, possibly zone 5, depending on your climate. You could see a little snow fell on these. Adaptable. Ours has never been hit by a single pest. Birds don't even seem to hit this that much. It's not, doesn't seem to be bothered too much by them.
And they're that strange that they need a little bit of a black mark to show that they're ready. And sometimes they even, because it's showing it's in the fig and mulberry, they have a little bit of latex,
Yeah.
but completely harmless. It's just a great underutilized.
And that's
trait.
Che, C-H-E, Che.
Am I doing this?
I don't, yes.
Yes, okay.
Medlar.
Medlar Mispilus germanica, also known commonly around Hortus as,
Horse anus fruit.
and you'll see why in a second. That was a colloquial
Because
name.
to medieval people, it looked like the bum of a horse.
For us, it just looks like a lovely ancient growing tree. This was originally from Turkey, Anatolia area. And as Scott said, it has an ancient medieval background.
Introduced into Europe in the 1600s and became popular with Chaucer
But
and Shakespeare.
I'm sorry, just look at these flowers. They're
Yeah.
so goddamn, oops, they're so beautiful. Really just stunning, low maintenance. Really, once again, we've done almost nothing other than, have we even limbed this up a little bit?
No.
But some compost for sure. No additional
Self-fertile,
irrigation.
Very
Yep.
easy. Related
And-
to loquat, looks a
Mhm.
little like loquats do.
Mhm. This is the fruit ripening, and you might think that, oh, it's pretty close to being ready. I took this image maybe 2 weeks ago. It's still not ready. This is a type of fruit very similar to persimmon where it needs to blet or rot or
Ferment a little.
ferment. And this generally happens for us when we get a hard frost, which we haven't had here yet. But this picture taken several years ago, the fruit against the golden foliage is just spectacular, just stunning. And then when the foliage is gone, the medlars persist, which is really lovely. Again, this is a fruit that we can go outside in January and take a piece off the tree, which is
Frozen and bring them in.
lovely. And it can be very productive, even as an older mature specimen, which is nice. And to us, the fruit, the texture is very similar to an applesauce. Scott gets notes of like cinnamon and spice, whereas I get more a berry flavor. It's a little crude because it's something you kind of have to squish and get around the seeds, very similar to persimmon that way, but we feel it's well worth it. And again, that whole decorative ornamental feature to have in your yard, this gives it four-season interest when sometimes a lot of us don't have a lot going on.
Yeah, this is the only fruit that you can literally walk out through 2 feet of snow in the middle of January and pick off.
Right.
Yeah, this is primarily now found in ancient gardens that are 200 or 300 years old, like monasteries in Europe. Italy, it's called Nespola. Still found in England a little bit, and people make jam and kind of fruit preserves out of it.
Yeah.
And there they are in the middle of winter.
are.
Passiflora incarnata, maypop. I'd say this out of everything in here is slightly more sensitive because this is a more southern fruit. It's from Appalachia, Virginia, the South. It will survive into zone 5. I always say if you get a small plant, keep it a few years as a house plant and then put it out when it has a big root system so it can survive. This is the only wild native edible passion fruit from the United States. And the best thing for pollination is you want to get 2 distinctly different plants. So I would recommend you actually buy them from different plant dealers because often you're getting the same genetic material, 2 plants that are generated from the same plant. Our plant has moved 45 feet in a greenhouse
Easily.
and gone up. So the idea that you can separate 2 plants is difficult, or you get 2 different cultivars. On the top is the beautiful alba, the albino form of it. On the bottom is the purple. Even if you never get the fruit, it's well worth it from the flowers.
Mhm.
Leaves and all the roots are traditional, used as a medicine for kind of insomnia and natural kind of relaxant. Beautiful, beautiful flowers. And those are the fruit ripening now in our greenhouse. This can be planted outside. It tends to, our greenhouse is 10 to 15 degrees hotter and it's humid. So it's like Georgia and Tennessee in our greenhouse. So we get huge amounts of fruit.
Although we did have a happy mistake this year where a piece of passion fruit vine ended up over a rock scree in a full sun site. And
They're
I
ripening.
noticed that fruits were developing, and so I left it in place rather than rip it out, because I don't want to have any more passion vine where we don't need it. And it was loaded with fruit. So that might
Yeah.
be a really productive way for someone who's in a zone 6 climate, or cooler, excuse me.
Zone 5.
5, cool, yeah, 6 or 5
Yeah.
would be, that would be a productive way of growing this, and not growing it in a greenhouse, which is not necessarily what we recommend to those. But for us, it
Unless
works.
you want to dig it up from everything.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful pain in the
beast.
butt.
yeah, it's a
I
beast.
I mean, we'll have 150 passion fruit, but we're ripping it out all the time.
Yeah.
It lacks some of the citrusy character of tropical passion fruit. So when we make passion fruit jelly, we squeeze oranges and lemons
Mhm.
into the juice to make our own passion fruit jelly, but it's well worth it. Those are the everils, the little fruit cells that are surrounding each seed, and you just eat it all scooped out
So
or with a
good.
spoon. Yeah.
So yummy. This is Pinus coreana, Korean stone pine. When visitors come to the Arboretum, they often wonder why we have some white pines planted so prominently in the garden. And I like to just kind of inform them that these are the relatives that make what we are so accustomed to having, pine nuts that we get at our co-op or grocery store. Generally speaking, those pine nuts, I think we found out like
Yes.
95% of the time, unless you're at a gourmet Italian shop, are really the Korean or from Asia pine nuts. They tend to be shorter and squatter, whereas the Italian ones
Are
are
long and
longer and
thin.
thinner. So these are these Korean pines. They have both male and female flowers on them, and we couldn't find a lot of information when we started growing.
I think they're somewhat fertile, but much better if you
With
planted
a
at
bunch,
least 2 or a
2.
group,
Mhm.
yeah, for cross-pollination.
So these are the male flowers that I took earlier in the season, and they start to grow up, and we were like, oh, bummer, that's not what we're looking for. And then we just happened to look up,
First year.
and this is the first year. So again, not quite what literature says out there. So this is why it's kind of really important to try, because every site is very different. Where you're growing something could be different from where we're growing, but just great to share information. And so these pine cones will take 2 years
To develop the
to
nuts.
develop the nuts. And yes, we are going to protect these with like
Yes.
a bolt and key
Yes.
and lock and the whole, no more, mesh bags. Really low maintenance tree, likes full sun, some acidity, great for screening. So over the past couple of years with COVID and everyone kind of, at least up in Hudson Valley, wanting to have some privacy from their neighbor, this would have been a good choice. But again, we don't have enough people growing these trees. So if there's anyone out there listening who's a grower or looking to have like a life change in career, this is such a great plant, along with goji. And then another one I'm going to talk about in a little bit that I really feel strongly should be more in our nurseries and markets.
These will get fairly sizable.
Yeah, they will. Like a white pine,
Yeah, they can
not-
get to
maybe
be,
not as big.
30 to 50 feet, not quite as big as a white pine, but large. They just require a lot of space and sun and well-drained soil. Yes, you are looking at an orange, Panceris trifoliata, a hardy orange, sour orange. This is flying dragon. It's a contorted bowed form of it. And right now we have hundreds and hundreds of tiny little golf ball size sour oranges. It has wicked, beautiful, curved hooked thorns. So you don't want to put this in a walkway where people walk right next to it. In the fall, it produces lots and lots of these crude, and it's a crude citrus. But you can squeeze a lot of them to get a little juice. They can be used for marmalade and for zesting. They're a good versatile fruit.
Great for your cocktail when you want to have like a little bit of a rind or a zest. It's fantastic. And I actually use the oranges a lot and put it in honey to flavor the honey, and it acts as a preservative.
Trees are bordering. You
It's
can see
gorgeous. Look at that.
that's
It's
an
great.
ice storm. Our trees have been subjected to, our tree has been subjected to 8 degrees below zero. It's also
fine.
taking 16 inches of snow multiple times. And this is what an ice storm on a flying dragon looks like.
So that
It's quite
that's why we
beautiful.
call this a 4-season plant, because it's just stunning. And these are the
That's
oranges.
this morning.
Yeah.
I grabbed a handful of them
Just
and took a
kind of
photograph.
show you the
Yep.
variable sizes there as well. That's you.
Ah.
You love this one
Prunus
too.
marittima, beach plum. I love American beach plums. This is one of the few plums that grows with no disease problems, no major troubles. And that's one of the reasons right there why you should
Yeah,
plant
look
beach
at that.
plums. Spectacular,
Stunning, beautiful.
native, tough. You almost cannot kill this plant. This can almost be, I jokingly say, driven through with a tractor and you would not kill the plant. You would just set it back. Other than full sun and well-drained soil, would make a great hedge in a suburb between two houses.
That's kind of what you're looking like, what you're seeing
A
here on the
wall
left,
there.
a wall here, just for privacy.
Great, tough, grows 6 to 8 feet by 6 to 8 feet. It can be, animals like these, and we'll strip the
Mhm.
trees. On a good year, we will have thousands of them. Tiny little wild plums. They have kind of a Concord grape plum flavor, great for jam, jelly. Traditional in Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod, people make plum jam with these as a wild use. Traditional, also Native American food. Can be quite beautiful, tough, easy to grow, no major problems.
Low maintenance.
When I say plum and I say no major problems and easy to grow, it's very rare.
Yeah, you don't ever hear that come out of his mouth unless
Plums
it's
are
beach plum.
hit so many problems, and these have an attitude. They're just like thugs. They just don't care.
Yep. Ribes, gooseberry. Everyone seems to know what gooseberry is, but it's so few people who have visited Hortus Arboretum have actually ever tasted. So if you're ever in the area during summer, we welcome you to come by and try. That's what we're all about. We're trying to get people to grow edible plants in their backyard. And even if it's your one shrub in your small backyard, it's such a worthy plant. You're looking at Invicta, which looks like it's thorny, but it is not. Very, very sweet tasting gooseberry. This is one we call eating out of hand because it's that sweet. Whereas some of them, I believe this is Jewel, you might want to cook a little bit. Actually, Jewel is sweet as well. But this one is Tixia. You definitely would want to cook. So they make great gooseberry pies, which we've done here, as well as jam.
Yeah.
Although some people like to eat them straight off the bush as well. They don't mind a little bit of the sourness of it. And there's so many different cultivars and varieties out there.
That's not John.
No, but it's just a beautiful. This plant does come with a couple issues, a little bit more than anything else that we've talked about. Meaning it wouldn't mind being in a little bit of shade in the Hudson Valley where we are. It's in a full sun site. And sometimes it does get defoliated by
Current worms.
a current worm, but that's very easy to take care of. It's not like you have to go into battle. And here's just showing you a variety. We're growing about a dozen different cultivars right now, so you can kind of see the different colors and shapes.
And the large one by her finger on the right, lower right, the big one. That's Jan's Prairie. That's our favorite. Yep. That was found in Ontario in the wild. That was incredibly sweet, native, delicious. Red currants, great, wonderful. A lot of people think all currants cause some of the blister rust problems that have happened on pines, and that only happens in the black species. The red one does not bear that problem. Pretty flower, subtle but pretty, and that is a red currant variety that is called pink champagne, which to me tastes very close to pomegranate in flavor. Wonderful, great. Very few problems, very few disease problems. Shrubs grow anywhere from 4 to 4 to 6 to 6. That's a more sharp flavored one. That's red currant. Red Lake probably is the variety. I think that's Red Lake. Wonderful, great jellies.
And they can produce pies. A lot of fruit where you not only are taking care of yourself and making jams and putting it in salads or eating out of hand, but you're also, wildlife loves it. And there's so much when a plant is mature, so that's easy going. And just showing the fruit on a strig, generally they all ripen at the same time. So it's pretty easy to harvest off a strig. And this is the last edible plant we're going to show you. This is one of my favorites. It's another one that I wish more growers were growing for the nursery trade. This is Schizandra chinensis, also known as the 5-flavor berry. This is a vine. It's on a support structure, so it definitely is going to need that. It's not an aggressive grower like the kiwi that we showed you. Has small, really delicate, almost inconspicuous flowers. It was originally marketed when it was brought into the US at the turn of the century as magnolia vine, because I
They
guess
look like
these
tiny little magnolia
teeny
flowers.
weeny ones. You can see in this image that the berry is just beginning to develop in the flower. I'm showing you a self-fertile variety. It's called Eastern Prince, but in the wild, in nature, it actually is dioecious. So you would have separate male and female plants. So if that's what
Yeah, we would
you're,
strongly recommend Eastern
if
Prince.
if you
It's
can find it,
it's
or a
wonderful.
different self-fertile, if there's someone is out there doing that right now. And then this is the fruit that is developing during early summer. The fruit tends to ripen in August, late August, unfortunately this year, because of our
Drought.
actually, I think something you didn't mention was our late freeze in May. I believe this is one of the plants that really got fried in terms of producing fruit, although a smaller specimen in a completely different garden and a different aspect and environmental area produced some fruit. So go figure, I don't know. But with that said, this 5-flavor berry has sweet, sour, bitter, astringent, and what's the 5th one?
Hot, is it hot?
Okay, piquant, spicy. I actually love this berry. A lot of people don't like to eat it fresh. I find most women don't mind it. It has a lemony tart, like you just sucked on a lemon quality.
Or as I like to say, if you boil this in water and put a sweetener and strain it, it tastes very, very close to strawberry lemonade, the flavor, which opens up a whole series of things for use in alcohol, for making ice pops, for making strawberry lemonade jelly. Very interesting.
I tend to dry the fruit, the berries. They come off very easily as a cluster. And I dry them and then I use them either in granolas or little, I don't know,
nut balls.
Yeah, little nut balls and protein balls. So it can be a versatile fruit to include. Extremely healthful. In Siberia and China, this fruit is often used for quick energy, for lethargy.
It's sold in the health industry as kind of an energy fruit, an energy drink.
And it's one of the top 50 fundamental herbs in Chinese medicine.
So it's like healthy strawberry lemonade. It's actually good
yeah,
for
there you go. And so I would really wish that we can get this more into the US market, because currently any Schizandra that you might come across is all from really one area in China. And just look at it, it's just, again, that ornamental value. I didn't say this is not a full sun plant. It wouldn't mind having 3 to 4 hours, but no more than that.
This produces food in part shade. It do not put this in full sun. We tried that and it got fried. Much better in 3-4 hours, much healthier.
And we've never, other than putting it in full sun where we nearly killed it, we've never had a problem. And sure,
no
I just said we had a frost that might have killed the flowers, but that's not this plant's fault. That could happen with anything.
Yeah, and like no pests have ever hit this.
Nothing.
It's not even attacked that much by birds. It's because they're kind of
the fruit's hidden.
Yeah.
So really love that plant. And just showing, like you could see, this is one vine. Maybe this is, I don't know, 10 years old now, 10 years old.
Again, one vine. After many years, you can feed a family with one vine.
Or supply your local co-op.
Yes.
And so that's 18, I think, of the 50 plants that we kind of focused on to talk to you guys about and share our love of, and really, really kind of
encourage you to plant.
Yeah, encourage you to plant one or maybe 2 of the things that we talked about, or maybe get our book that goes into a lot more depth of history, cultural aspects, propagation. What else am I missing?
Lots of pretty pictures.
And lots of pretty pictures. Yes. So thank you so much.
Yes,
and
thank you.
We're happy to hang in and take some questions.
Well, thank you very much. And the questions have certainly been coming in. I'll work through them. So one of the first from Norman Tyler was, what's the best varieties of hazelnuts for Long Island?
I love Slate and Geneva. They're double size. They're almost, American hazelnuts are kind of dime size. The double size ones are like, what I'm talking about is what, like when they make Nutella in the commercial chocolate industry, they're
Yeah.
using ones that are nickel size. They're almost double size. Slate and Geneva are both double size. There's a lot of good reputable of growers who've bred varieties of high quality large nuts. You do not want to get, you do not want to make the mistake I did. Do not get a grafted hazelnut. It should be on its own roots. Otherwise, you will be pruning it for the rest of your life. Because if it'll sucker constantly, and so you'll have to cut the suckers off all the time. Otherwise, you'll be back with the original grafting stock. So you want to get one that's on its own roots, which it's easy to do. You just have to buy it from a reputable place. But there's probably 20 or 30 extra large nuts that you can get.
Please let us know the best places to buy these fruit trees. I am in Illinois. Thanks.
Upper Midwest, there's a lot. You know, Stark Brothers is an old, like for 100 years, mail order nursery that's really famous. There's a bunch of great mail order nurseries from the West Coast. Oregon is obviously one of the best growing spots in the United States. I know Rain Tree, One Green World, Fedco Seeds from Maine is a great old established hippie co-op farm that sells great
Also, you'd be surprised if you're someone who follows social media, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, there is a big interest in you know, sustainability and growing permaculture, people who are really focused on growing and starting small seedlings. So there might be a permaculture group or food forest group in that area where this person is asking who might have small seedlings for sale. And sometimes I've seen a lot of people advertising their wares on, per se, Instagram, saying like, I'm selling this, this, and this, and this is what's available now.
Yeah, and
so
I bet with the internet, there's a lot more choices.
There's a lot more, yeah.
So I'll keep going down the list, but we have quite the knowledgeable guests. So if you have questions of your own, throw them into the Q&A. We still have many to go, but we're walking through them. I'm wondering if you are growing Pinus idyllius as well as P. koreana. That's our opinion of the Southwest. That is grown by indigenous people.
I dug up 2 or 3 little pinyon pines that I dug up, and they survived for a little while, and I got them from the top of a mountain that it snowed, and I thought they would make it, and they ended up not doing it. Maybe we're too wet because we have heavy clay soil, and occasionally we'll get situations where it rains for days and days and days, and I don't think they like that.
We also didn't take the soil with the plant. I mean, so that
but no, pinyon pines are supposed to be delicious. There's about, I think, 10, 15 edible pine nut species, you know, some in the United States, some in Asia, some in the Mediterranean, that have really high quality nuts. But pinyon pines are supposed to be wonderful.
I grow ribes for kids in neighborhood to taste, so it is out front by the sidewalk. Love all your varieties.
Yay, okay, that's great.
Thank you.
Are all the species and cultivars that you mentioned today in your book? Can I find species lists of varietals of your website for the Arboretum?
All the species we named are in the book, and there's cultivar lists with every one. There's at least 4 or 5 listed on each one of them.
Get the book.
Yes, get the book.
Get the book, would say, and it is, as I'm aware, available at all online and some maybe shops. So readily available.
Even the big ghost of the big ghoul of Amazon carries it. But I was going to just go back to that question. So things are also very seasonal. So sometimes certain varieties that we're talking about or might not be available at a very particular time of year. Like a couple of years, they just haven't grown them out, or they're too small, or they're trying something new. Sometimes that's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, the secret, I'm going to give you the secret. If you want rare fruit trees, you order them in the middle of winter when no one's ordering them. If you wait till spring, they're all sold out. The amount of people grafting pawpaw trees in the United States is a handful because you have to keep them a long time. The amount of people grafting apples are hundreds. So if you want rare things, get them in winter before anybody's ordering them. Right after the inventories are done, like January 1st, you start to look, and you get them when people are not thinking about it yet. That's the best time.
Fabulous advice. when you talk about drying the goji berries, do you use a dehydrator?
I tend to use a couple different things depending on how many I have. I do have a dehydrator, a good one, and I would dry it on raw food setting. We also use, like, believe it or not, our furnace, which gives off indirect heat, which dries things even slower than the lowest temperature of a dehydrator, and tends to retain the color even better.
Yeah, so by that, what she means is our heater, which heats our stuff for the winter, our water heater. If you put a container on top of that, it tends to be 90 degrees. It's not really hot, but it's enough that it dries out bulbs and it dries out produce and herbs and keeps them very mildly dried out. And if you leave it on there for a week, things dry really nicely.
And the color's vibrant.
Yeah,
so,
the color's more
but
vibrant.
dehydrator works amazing. You just have to be super mindful because they're very small fruits.
We have another question here, just again, an opportunity to clarify, where can I get the book? Well, it is available everywhere, including on bookshop.org, which is a great place to go purchase your books because it also supports, when you make a purchase through the website, it supports your local bookshops.
That, and also I would say Chelsea Green publishers will often, if you've never ordered directly from their website, you can get like 10% or 15% off your first order. So
Wonderful.
That's another way of getting the book at a reduced
Go
fee.
right to the source.
If you're close to Hortus in the Hudson Valley, we always sell signed copies. So, yep.
Oh, that is special. But for those who are at some distance, there is at least now one source, which I've just sent to everyone in the webinar, a link there to bring.
Thank you, Philip.
Seller.
I mean,
just a nice comment. Thank you. This was very helpful. Do you have a grower you would use for the hazelnut? I think you may have mentioned one.
There's a lot of people. In Canada, there's the Grimo Nut Nursery, a family that's been doing that for 20 or 30 years. They're reliable. They're great to go to for information. He's Ernie Grimo is a long storied reputation of breeding hardy nut trees. I've gone to them for a lot of information. They're great. And then there's other mail order nurseries that specialize in nut trees and fruit trees that are great. Like I mentioned, like Rain Tree and One Green World are great. And yeah.
Wonderful. And our last comment question here is totally getting the book ! Which is a wonderful way to close out the Q&A portion of this. Just, we do have time, 1 or 2 more minutes. So I might ask, what is you sort of anticipating for future years and sort of in the disruptions that you've experienced this past one?
Our next book.
Well, that's not what he's asking, but you can go.
But I think that's a good answer. Is what I think I'm about to hear.
I'm going to work on a book on subtropical fruit trees that can be kept on as house plants that actually produce fruit, and perennial vegetables. We originally pitched this as a larger book, and they said, let's divide it into 2 books, and let's put the first book out, less risk for you, less risk for us, just hardy fruit. The next one can be that.
And Alison, do you think maybe in future books you might sort of address some of the challenges that you're increasingly experiencing?
So that's our third book. It's
the third book. My goodness.
Yeah, can I give the title? Yeah, it's
Confessions of Seed Stealers,
the making of an arboretum, because most people know about arboretums when they've been established for 50 years plus. We started this 20 years ago, so we're really a young arboretum, and I think that people are interested to know the story about how you start something like that when you are not necessarily bankrolled.
And I think also in terms of the future growing, resiliency is the most important thing. I think planting the widest diversity of problem, because then when it's plants, when there's drought, certain things don't mind drought. When there's too much rain, certain things don't mind too much rain. If you have risk spread out through a bunch of different plants, you're always at least likely to get some every year, even if you don't get it all. So it's a good thing to do.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Alison. If I could ask you to go to the next slide to give a shout out for our next guests in 2 weeks' time at our normal time at 2 p.m. So that's Thursday, November 17th. That's Stamps and Stamps, who are out in Pasadena in California, and they are garden designers and interior decorators. So please do join us for that in 2 weeks' time, and I look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks again. and see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for including
Thank
us.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.